Friday, July 5th, 2019. Why do I keep a journal? Why do I write every day? I started journaling on July 28th, 2017, almost exactly 2 years ago. I can definitively say that because I have the entry. This first entry itself is at once shy, curious, and hopeful. In short, it's everything I wish to have in a first conversation at the beginning of a long and fruitful friendship. But why? Not just why write every day, but why do it in a physical journal, by hand? There are so many advantages to doing it digitally. Backing it all up in the cloud, journaling applications, notifications for daily habit forming. Best of all, typing doesn't aggravate my dysgraphia. What? Right. I might not have mentioned my dysgraphia earlier. Actually, I think you could go back through my 2 years of journaling and it might barely come up at all. Just so you know, this isn't an official description of dysgraphia, nor is it fully an explanation of what it is. This is my experience with it. So let's start at the beginning. About halfway through the first grade, I moved from Alabama to New Mexico. As if this wasn't a big enough change, I also switched from the Waldorf system to a public school. If you're unfamiliar with the Waldorf system, you might wonder why this might be as big of a deal as moving states to me. Waldorf is a much slower-moving, curiosity-driven system of education. While I couldn't recommend it more for the entirety of school life, switching from it to a public school was jarring, to say the least. While in first grade at Waldorf, I had just started learning how to write letters and read short words, so when I was dumped into public school, I was shocked to discover that the children around me were not only working on printing full sentences, but beginning to learn cursive lettering as well. Not only was I behind, I felt stupid. But I managed to catch up, practicing lettering at home with my parents so I'd be able to participate in class and learning to read bit by bit. By the second grade, I had learned to read and write, though I hated it. By third grade, though I was reading with the rest of the class, my handwriting had not caught up. So each day the school counselor would take me aside for writing therapy, extra writing practice to improve the poor handwriting we thought was caused by my sudden transition from the Waldorf system to public school. Eventually, the counselor became frustrated with the fact that I wasn't improving and sought out further explanation. After some time, he called my mom in and explained that I had dysgraphia. I think he described some of the symptoms, but maybe he didn't do a very good job. After all, this was a school counselor, not a pediatric neuropsychologist. They told my mom that it would take extensive testing and visits with doctors and specialists to properly diagnose, and a proper diagnosis is what they would need to let me have any special treatment in school, typing papers, using the computer for written parts of tests, etc. My family wasn't particularly poor, but we also couldn't justify spending that kind of money and time for something that we understood as poor handwriting. So, elementary school continued. I don't remember much of elementary school. I blocked a lot of it out because I hated it. I was bullied a lot and generally had a bad time, so a lot of this is reconstructed from conversations with my parents. Luckily, in high school, I went to a charter school. For those that don't know, a charter school is just a public school with less regulations, but also a lot less funding. One of the advantages here, though, is that I didn't need the official diagnosis. I was allowed to bring in a laptop to type notes, use a computer for tests, and we were already required at this point to type our papers and essays. At this point, though, my understanding of dysgraphia was that it was just a fanciful word for bad handwriting that made it so I could use a computer in school. I hand wrote so little that I barely thought of it. I've always wanted to keep a journal. I always thought it was so cool. Despite the fact that my handwriting, by all accounts, is nearly illegible, it's just something that I've wanted to do. I've also grown able to feel the difference in the kinds of connections my brain makes when I'm writing by hand versus writing on a computer. There's no digital way to replicate that particular aspect of pen and paper. So, 2 years ago, I bought a journal, and I bought a fountain pen. Why? Partially because I thought it would help me commit to the practice. As I started the practice, though, I remembered something I'd forgotten about writing. The pain. After writing for any extended period of time, pain will start in my wrist, and the more I write, the more painful it gets, feeling almost like a cramp running all the way up my arm after writing barely a page. In the process of this, I remembered that word, dysgraphia, and I realized that though it's been looming over my head for just about as long as I've been writing anything, I knew next to nothing about it. So I found the Wikipedia page, and the more I read, the more I felt like someone had reached into my soul and pulled out a journal entry I had never written. Much of the following is paraphrased from that page, which I'll link below. Dysgraphia is a deficiency in the ability to write, primarily handwriting. It's characterized as a learning disability, when one's writing skills are below those expected given a person's age, measured through their intelligence and age-appropriate education. There are at least two stages of writing, the linguistic stage and the motor expressive stage. And there are three kinds of dysgraphia: spatial dysgraphia, dyslexic dysgraphia, and motor dysgraphia. The first two affect mostly the linguistic stage, while mine, motor dysgraphia, primarily affects the motor expressive stage. I'm mostly going to talk about motor dysgraphia here. Motor dysgraphia is due to a deficient of fine motor skills, poor dexterity or muscle tone, or unspecified motor clumsiness. Letter formation might be acceptable in short samples of writing, but this takes extreme effort and often an unreasonable amount of time, and it can't be sustained for extended periods. We may experience difficulty with fine motor skills such as tying shoes or braiding hair, both of which I've experienced acutely. I didn't learn to tie my shoes until the 4th grade, and despite having had long hair for much of my life, I can't braid it worth a damn. In the section on motor dysgraphia, there's a sample of writing and a list of symptoms, both of which affected me so deeply that I was nearly moved to tears. Cramping and pain in the fingers and wrists, excessive erasures, mixtures of capital and lowercase letters, inconsistent form and size of letters, misuse of lines, inattentiveness over details, the list goes on. And here's that writing sample. Here is a sample of my handwriting when I take my time. With a lot of effort and no small amount of discomfort, I can make my handwriting legible. I can only write this way for a little while, and then I become unable to write neatly and consistently. Here is a sample of my handwriting when I write without thinking. This also takes effort and is painful, but doesn't require the same intense concentration and grip. The longer I write, the worse my handwriting gets. If I keep writing like this, eventually even I won't be able to read my handwriting any longer. So this all brings me back to that question. Why write every day? Why keep a journal at all? For me, there are several reasons. It's something that brings me joy, something that I love. Despite the pain that I fight through as I do it, it helps me make new connections, and it's a physical connection from me to myself to all of my past selves. It's a place where I can collect my thoughts, my emotions, and my days in a way that is free of any judgment but my own. A place where I can explore new ideas, create art, and hold close to me what is dear but fleeting. It's a place where I can conquer the shame that I felt for most of my life, the feeling that I was stupid because my handwriting looked like a 6-year-old's. And my handwriting is improving. The pain never goes away, though I can stave it off for slightly longer than I could in the 3rd grade. I still accidentally cross my L's and dot my E's, and my lines on the page often drift sideways, up and down as though letters are floating on the sea that is the page. But that doesn't matter to me anymore. I write every day,